Welcome to Trending in Education, a very special edition. I'm here with the founder and CEO of Kiddom, Ahsan Rizvi. Ahsan, welcome to Trending in Education.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Excited to be here.
But it's not just an episode of Trending in Education. It's also a live webinar we're doing for Kiddom here today. And this is the second of a two-parter. We did part one with Whitney Green a little while back. Just to get to know you a little, I always like to start with my guests' origin stories. Can you catch us up on how you got to this point in your career?
Yes, my story, and it's the classic immigrant story. I was born and raised in Pakistan, in Karachi, and then came to the US. Went to college here, and my second day of college, I met my co-founder,
Mm.
Abbas Manji, who's the chief academic officer, and sometimes the bane of my existence, and sometimes the best friend I can have.
Right.
It really depends on the day.
And this
So
is back at University of Illinois, is that right?
yeah, yes, so it's back into the University of Illinois. We both went to the engineering school there initially. Abbas eventually went and joined the business school. I stayed with engineering school, and we both studied there. I was very interested in the whole idea of not just going to engineering school as as an immigrant. You're very much focused on the sciences. I was very much
Mhm.
focused on math and mathematics, physics, chemistry, like all the sciences, STEM subjects.
Yeah.
But I had never really encountered the social sciences in Pakistan. So I was very intrigued by that. So I
Yeah.
ended up going to Illinois, doing a bunch of studying around philosophy and political science. I was very intrigued by that as well.
Mm.
When I got out of college, or during college, I had done a bunch of internships in the Valley. The Valley was very much, Silicon Valley is what I meant. At that time, Silicon Valley was very much a corner of the world, right?
Mm.
Google was big, but that's about it. Like in the
Yep.
mid to late 2000s, there was no iPhone. So I couldn't really connect with like what my other friends were doing was going to the East Coast, doing banking and consulting. I also had this thread that I wanted to do something that had an impact in people's lives in a very direct manner right
Mm.
off. I did that through some work with the Small Business Administration, being part of the team that was responsible for uh, post-Katrina response. So how do you economically develop an
Mm.
area that's depressed by a massive,
Yeah.
uh, a massive
Disaster. Yeah.
natural disaster,
Mm-hmm.
which includes like funding for schools, economic
Yeah.
recovery, small businesses, like how do you give out loans? So all these like really interesting problems.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I ended up working at a small place called the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, which is kind of like the World Bank, IFC, funding development projects across the world. Worked on a bunch of literacy investments over there with the team, or had the pleasure, and I was junior analyst there. But that got me into this idea of you could use capital and deploy it for really good purposes.
Mm-hmm.
There's our market. Sometimes the market is not perfect, and so you have to sort of have incentives for folks to go and invest in the
Yeah.
country,
Innovate. Mm-hmm.
right? Like so that was the whole idea. So I did that, and then grad school, did a master's in education policy, economic policy,
Mm.
focused on education policy, because I was like really intrigued by this idea of like how do you take an area that doesn't have literacy, how do you
Got it.
enable people to gather the tools and skills and capabilities
Yeah.
by
So
educating?
it's kind of like impact investing, focusing on literacy, and then
Yeah.
you had studied that more broadly, perhaps, and now this was an opportunity to kind of focus that attention yourself in the U.S.
Right. Well, it wasn't that clear initially. Well, the first thing that came was like I didn't want to do a PhD program. So the
Yeah.
first thing was like, okay, what do I do if I don't want to do just this 5-year thesis, graduate
Sure.
degree?
Right.
And yeah, and there was some meandering after that, as is the case.
That's what
But,
your 20s are for, if you're lucky. Yes.
well, yeah. But I had a ticking time bomb on the visa, so I had to figure out what to do next really
Yeah.
quickly. That
Hmm.
was So I ended up starting a company with a couple of friends of mine that for a bit joined their endeavor of making clothing and apparel, and
Interesting.
that was a very
You struck me as someone who would have been in tech the whole time. So it is interesting. I keep waiting for the turn to get into the technology side because that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time. But it's interesting that a lot of your background didn't start in tech.
no, it didn't. Yeah, there's like the canonical like going to Berkeley or Stanford and like joining a tech company very early. Like, yeah, that's not the story. And that's
Mhm.
really not the story of Kiddom too. We didn't start a company and then try to figure out what problem we want to solve.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I started a company with a couple of friends of mine, we exit that company, and then I moved to the Bay Area around 2011, 2012, and really started thinking about how to do things for technology, started building apps and services,
Yeah.
built
And
up
this
with,
is the real post iPhone
yeah,
Web 2.0 wave.
right, exactly. And that was the best part, right? Like the reason to move to the Bay Area at that time was like it was exciting. Like the
Mhm.
rest, like when you were starting a business in Chicago, everyone thought that you were just in between jobs, essentially,
Yeah.
which was our case. But when you said it in the Bay Area, it was like, no, you're actually tell me more. Like,
Mhm.
well, we're intrigued. Classically, this is sort of the Bay Area ethos was, okay, what are you doing? What's the idea? Like this sort of free range and free pollination of ideas was very different from the rest of the country. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen in the rest of the world. And
Mhm.
I've lived in Chicago, so I'm talking from experience there. But in the Bay Area, it was like people were intrigued, and they would help.
Mhm.
And so yeah, and one of the things that I did during that time when I was in here was I started volunteering and substitute teaching and doing a bunch of work on education, and then that led to the initial Kitten product. So.
Yeah. So let's get into Kiddom. I think folks are ready to hear the Kiddom side of the story, and then your background I think leans a little more into education. So how about that aspect of things?
Yeah, like Kiddom is building a system that helps schools and districts use curriculum to the best of their ability, core curriculum, and to a large degree, high quality instructional materials with some supplemental products. And we embed all the instructional technology that's required for that core curriculum within within the platform, and then we have all this data that gets that comes from the usage of the platform that can provide like really interesting insights
Right.
for
And
districts.
Kiddom was founded to solve problems for teachers
Right.
mostly, right? Yeah. Because I
And
think
it,
we probably have some teachers and like administrators out in the audience now because this is live. We are live, which is exciting too for folks who may feel like they're watching a podcast. If you're in the audience, we can see you are there. We can't see you. You can see us. And if you have questions, you can enter them in the chat. We're going to get more into some of the more recent work that's been happening at Kiddom as well around AI, because AI is the reason why a lot of us are here. But maybe fast forwarding a little bit in terms of Kiddum's story, because Kiddum's been around for a little while too. Like you're not a flash in the pan. This is something where you were a technology startup pre-pandemic, pre-AI wave. And like I think that perspective probably gives you some opportunity to solve the right kind of problems and have the right mindset when you're engaging with K-12 audience.
yeah, I think our ethos has always been this in this you know even in the AI world, our ethos has always been that we need to build tools that enable the teachers to have superpowers.
Mhm.
And the idea is that how do you have superpowers? Well, you give them the best tools that do a lot more work that they can do without the tools, right?
Right.
And a lot of what and it comes from sort of this philosophy, which is kind of contrarian to the Silicon Valley philosophy of technology in education, which really focuses on how do you put adaptive learning systems in front of students? How do you get like out? How do you get the teacher out of the way of the students to enable them to learn by themselves, right?
Mhm.
You see that in the 1920s, from the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, there's always been some mechanical or analog to digital fabrication of that idea. So the pressing machines
Mhm.
uh, were the first machines that in the 1920s were
Yeah.
created. And that's basically like there's a multiple choice question that
Right.
comes in. presses a
Right.
button, and
Yep.
then it's another thing. And if you see, like,
Scantrons were a big deal, even thinking about chalkboards when they went to whiteboards. There's a lot of innovation, and then the calculator is the one that I hear the most when you're analogizing to AI. Can you maybe, just for folks who are in the audience, they may want to know a little more about what's new and newsworthy. This week AI features were announced as part of Kiddom's platform. Can you talk through what went into that whole endeavor? What kind of stuff's rolling out, and what led to this launch?
yeah, so we've been any technology company that is building products, and we've been building products for 8 years successfully and serving customers in K to 12. Whenever a new wave of innovation or platform changes comes in, we're excited about it. We're excited about what can enable. It's the same, when the internet comes in, you want to put your products up there in the 90s
Right.
because that's what the people,
Yeah.
that's innovation, right?
Yeah.
And
People also, I mean, the cautionary tale you hear a lot is like dropping iPads into downtown Newark and or Chromebooks, and just figuring that having the technology there
well, yeah,
does automatically drive output. So like there's some
yeah.
good ways to do the integration, and there's some tricky ones too.
The most famous being the one laptop per child initiative, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, that every child should have a laptop and they can just, again, learn by themselves because they have a laptop. They've preloaded all this, all the work in there, and you press a button, you play. And fundamentally, that's like a lot of people believe that the device and the student are like the teacher as a medium is not important.
Right,
Our ethos is completely sort of different
right,
on this.
right,
The teacher is very important to facilitate the conversation,
right,
not for giving assessments and this and that, but like the idea that the medium should be the screen and the child, and in this age of AI, is becoming even more compounded as a medium.
right,
But this belief is completely, it's been going around for 100 years, and it's just not right. And so the
right.
idea, our ethos is like, hey, we're going to build tools that enables teachers to facilitate that conversation with students in a more meaningful way, right?
Hmm.
All the products, so we launched a bunch of AI products. There's going to be more launches. So we've been working on this for the past year. We didn't want to launch something as soon as GPT-4 came out because we wanted to be thoughtful about what we can build and what can actually do, like, and how well it does. I think what our work is around how can teachers use high quality instructional materials to the best of their capabilities using tools? Because what we see is that a lot of teachers do not have the time to unpack materials. They do not have the time to grade the students. They don't have the time to start discourse with the students or give them feedback on the assessments that they're providing them. And we want to make sure that teachers can do those things, and that's what we build the AI to do. We build the AI to make sure that teachers can, if you don't have 60 minutes to run a lesson plan, then we will make the AI help you run that same lesson plan in 30 minutes. And it
Right,
would know what to give up, what not to give up. It would preserve the intent of the authors. It will
right,
preserve it will preserve the standards. It will make sure students get to learn the same thing. But
right.
that's what I see, like the facilitation
Yeah.
of tools in a more meaningful manner in the classroom, given the
Hmm.
reality of the classroom, is that they get disrupted all the time and teachers
Yeah.
don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah. So, and just to catch everybody up, I'm an ex-Kaplan guy, so I like to say all the words in an acronym. And I learned HQIM, which
Mhm.
is high quality instructional material. So HQIM is what we're talking about here, and that was one of the strengths of Kiddom pre-pandemic, pre-AI. You already were in schools for some time, providing a platform that gives instructors access to high quality instructional materials. And then on top of that, the pandemic hits, everybody has to go online for a little while. That would be an interesting development, I would imagine, in terms of accelerating things as one component there. And then on top of that acceleration, in November of 2022, ChatGPT hits the scene, and that accelerates us even further. Teachers are kind of on the front lines through all of this, dealing with a lot of administrators, school leaders, district leaders. They're all dealing with kind of constant change when they need to catch up, to your point. And then now you're saying enough time has passed in terms of this new transformative innovation in artificial intelligence to integrate it back into the high quality instructional materials platform that you have there. One advantage you're mentioning here is speed, right? So like, and also I guess tailoring time management and classroom management so that you can get a custom built curriculum that is just going to address a little pocket of time.
Yeah, so I'll sort of on the history side, I think the pandemic was actually bad for high quality instruction materials. It was good for kids because we were providers of this
Yeah.
instruction in a digital manner, but I think most of the country did not actually use high quality materials.
Mm-hmm.
The default was, and the reason is that there's a historic reason, there's not been a lot of innovation in core curriculum in the country. Most of that innovation on the digital side has gone to the supplemental program. So when the pandemic hit, everything went digital and you had to go digital. The only thing available to go digital with was supplemental programs, which are generally tend to be used like 20 minutes a week or something
Yeah.
like
Right.
sort of a station rotation. You do it 20 minutes. But what
Right.
you're talking about core curriculum, you're talking about 2 to 3 hours of programming, right?
Right.
That's the program that you're going to use for 2 to 3 hours as a teacher. And so the idea is like how do you enable the teacher to use that? So fast forward after the pandemic, we are then looking at okay, the supplemental programs are now working at improving student outcomes. Learning loss is like sort of increasing, and gaps are increasing. So a lot of schools sort of go back to we have or in districts go back to like we have to adopt like high quality instructional materials. That's a wave that's happening around the country, and our hope for that is that great, that's amazing. High quality instructional materials should happen, but the problem there is we don't have like they require a lot of rigor and a lot of professional development and professional learning for teachers to unpack and use in the classroom. And we
Mm-hmm.
do not have the hours of PD available to
Right.
teachers to do that. So what do you need? We can build through this new wave of technology, AI tools and AI enabled curriculum
Yeah.
that enables you to deploy that in a much better manner, like in
Makes
a much
sense.
faster,
Yeah.
cheaper, and but if you have these helps and scaffolds around teachers, they can use that
Right.
to
And
instruction materials.
I like the problem-based orientation towards AI is something I've been talking to a lot of people about, where like humans are going to have to get better at problem formulation because a lot of the problem-solving tools are getting better. So you need to figure out, to your point about even your background around going after a high impact space in education, realizing you could actually make an impact by going there, impact investing, innovating, social good, double bottom line, all those kinds of things. That's one element of it. But I think the other element is, how do we build AIs that are human centered, are connected to the real problems that the teachers have? One is I only have 15 minutes. How can I hit a learning objective, hit something I'm on the hook for in a way that's kind of conscious of time, doesn't feel rushed, doesn't require me to kind of do all that ad hoc uh, improvisation, which teachers are great at, but it's tiring. Like that solves a real problem that's out there. I did want to pick up on a question. So I think that's a really interesting orientation. I want to talk more about that with you as well. There is a question here from Abby Cart, which is would love to hear more from Essen about the anti-bias implications of AI assisted grading that taps into existing teacher rubrics.
Yeah, that's a very complicated question, but I'll try to answer the best I can. I think one of the things that we have been thinking a lot about is trying to figure out how, like one of the features we announced was scoring students, right? Scoring students' work. And scoring a multiple choice is easy. It's only one answer or two answers. There's a limited number of possibilities. But scoring something for a teacher that's more open-ended is a fundamentally hard problem, right? And I think because there's a lot of, you have to understand the question, the context, and there's all this stuff around how teachers grade, all this research around how teachers grade, which is not just about the question, it's about the sort of social construct in which the question actually happens. Like, what did they do in the classroom? Like, did the student behave well? Did the student like write better than the last time they did? Like, so
Yeah.
is there any a lot of improvement? So there's a lot of, and then there's this is objectively the right answer. So
Mm-hmm.
the way we've been doing it is like we have a whole array of data around how teachers score these active assessments, right? Like we have millions of these artifacts that we can tell that, okay, teachers can, this is how a teacher will score a short form response in this grade level.
Yeah.
And what we've been trying to figure out is, well, these sort of what's the best way to score them, right?
Right.
And I think what we've been trying to do is make sure that we're more attuned with how a teacher would score them versus some sort of idea of what objectivity
Right.
is. And we don't really know what objectivity is in a short form response question. So
Yeah.
what we on is that making grading it through AI as close to as a teacher would grade them.
Yeah. Which is
So
another, and getting back to my previous point, like there is a real problem around the time suck that is grading. And there
yes.
is a lot of human labor that ideally, like kind of lower yield thinking. It's a thinking task to grade this stuff. It does require work, and then we will still need to continue to train and check the models. So it's not like humans are not in the loop in terms of how we're going to be grading and how we're going to be developing the rubrics. Like it is important, I think, to make sure there's trust with the teachers, and that's why I think also the anti-bias orientation, at least being aware that your data set needs to be representative, that there frequently are flaws. Humans are flawed reasoning animals, you know? So like there are places where if not done thoughtfully, if not done carefully, you know, I think it does introduce some risk. And then even more broadly, like how long are these types of writing, open-ended writing, free response writing things going to be evaluated the way they have been traditionally, because there are AI assistants out there, because there are new ways to kind of generate these types of outputs. There's also a question here about what other new AI features will Kiddom provide and when. So this is kind of the start of a roadmap, I imagine, and you probably have some vision forward. So like, what areas are you looking at next? You know, you added, and also did we hit on enough of? Did we kind of go bullet by bullet, like what's new? Just you know, what stuff is out
Let's
there?
go with there. I think let's go with there. I think let's go with what we're doing currently, and we can go in what how we're thinking about the future.
Sure.
Um, I think what we're thinking about currently are things that are actually doable and useful for teachers. There's a lot of hype around these things right now.
Yep.
A lot of POCs and point solutions. I mean, one way to think about it, like we have like a million supplemental tools in the kids draw space, and we're just replacing them with like these point solution AI tools,
I
like
see.
a grader. This is your lesson plan
Right.
generator.
As opposed to like an integrated platform where like there's kind of continuity of care kind of across the touch points.
Right, and then there's enough data to see whether it works. Like a lot,
Correct.
there is no data in the AI field right now on
Hmm.
like, okay, did it work?
Right.
Did you respond better? There's
Hmm.
like there's a year, 2 years. There's no benchmarks. There's no so so without going to that part, but what we're the platform approach allows you to do that, right? That's the thing. So it's not easy. You have to be a technology company to do that, and I think that's why we believe that we're in a good place to do that. So the way we think about the AI features at Kiddom is, okay, how does the teacher's journey start with these materials, and how do they go through the materials, and what are the biggest pain points that we see in their unpacking and using of these materials, right?
Yeah.
So you can go from the idea that, okay, this time management thing, right? Can we do uh, can we do a lesson plan in 30 minutes? That's really important. Like a lesson clipper is what we call it, but it's
Hmm.
basically shortens the lesson plan. But you could see that being a lot, it could be 40 minutes, 50 minutes. It could be very much tethered to what you need to do as a scaffold. Other things that we've been working on are a lot of a lot of students need a lot more procedural fluency work, and essentially that means a lot of practice. There's not a lot of practice in a lot of the curricula we carry, so we will build a lot of we can generate that on demand. The third and fourth things are all about teachers being able to provide feedback to students. So something we see in our data all the time is that a lot of assessments and activities and quizzes are often not provided feedback on, and that really means that's not good for students, right? Because yeah, you might provide feedback in a classroom setting, but what you really want to do is enable teachers to have that individualized focus for the student. Like I can provide
Yep.
you with one question, and that's
Hmm.
really good because now that enables you the teachers to see how the students are doing. But again, that's not scalable. Like imagine every lesson plan takes about has about 20 questions, and you have 20 students, and you have to grade like 400 questions every 3 to 4 days. and provide individualized feedback, that's not going to happen, right?
Right.
So how can we auto score and how to auto feedback? How can we keep the teachers in the loop so they make
Yeah.
sure they accept all these things?
They
Because
actually are delivering the personalization to some extent, right? Because that's the thing that I found interesting about your approach is that I thought of it as teacher facing. I also saw some reference to it's behind the teacher, which is an interesting way to think about it too. Because when you think it's teacher facing, it's almost like they're holding a screen between them and the student. This
right.
is more like it's kind of giving them the tools and the awareness they need so that they can kind of lean into the human side more. And it's something that I've heard people talk about at a higher level. But what's really interesting, especially because you were that high quality instructional material platform for years, you already had that kind of instrumented, mature platform, mature data story kind of under the hood so that you could actually leverage AI in interesting ways. Speaking of that, David Brown has an interesting question here. What indicators focus Kiddom on the balancing of the advancement of in tech and meeting districts in their commitment to educational equity? I guess are those things, first off, are they in conflict? Are there disconnects there? And then, if so, how do you weigh which direction to go? So, I think it is interesting. We've had a couple folks talk about some of the risk around using AI and managing against balance and bias, excuse me, and then in this case, I like the framing of balance where it sounds like even in your case, it wasn't like you were rolling out AI features immediately after ChatGPT hit the scene. There is kind of like an internal vetting of the roadmap, and the fact that you're a mature platform means you don't necessarily need to chase every new thing that's hitting the scene. But how do you manage against the need for speed and then maybe focus on some other more social, even equity based themes that are out there in schools these days?
The way I see it is that if there are things that can enable teachers to have better impact on students, which that we believe can have a bigger and better impact on students. And I think we're showing that with the products we're doing. And it's our moral imperative to make sure that those get into Kiddom and get in front of teachers and get in front of students eventually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think I think if it would be worse off if we know something is good, but we decide not to do it because it's a business concern, right?
Right, right.
I think us investing in these things is we're taking a chance here. We don't know if these things, like no one really knows how successful these things will be. Like there's
Right.
very companies who make like revenue right now on
Well,
AI.
and even outside of the companies too, I imagine there's like district leaders, principals, teachers out there who are trying to figure out how do I use AI? Like, how do I kind of bring it into the classroom? Maybe they're not even using it at
Right.
all, but maybe they're already using Kiddom. It's almost like, you know, anyone who's taken an Uber or has watched a show on Netflix has used AI. They just didn't know they were using it. It does seem like some of this stuff is kind of like elevating everybody's game, and it should be elevating teachers' games. And that's where if you already kind of had them as your customers, your users as far as designing high quality instructional material, having access to the good stuff. I hear your point about the pandemic where there was a lot of, in some ways there's more risk now with generative AI too, that there'll be more junk in the system. So like how do you find the good stuff? But yeah, thoughts on that, like thoughts on the impact of some of this stuff on the quality. I imagine there will be more high quality stuff created more from like a curriculum design perspective, but I feel like there'll be a lot of like lower quality stuff just kind of pumped out.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's the other part of equity in this thing, right? Like, so there's going to be like a pump of, again, just like in the 2000s, we saw this sort of blooming of the supplemental space in K to 12 ed tech. Some of it is great, it's needed, not saying, and there's a lack of innovation in core curriculum, right? Like just a complete lack of anything. Like you want to use core curriculum, use a book. You want to use something, anything to do with digital, go buy supplemental tech, right? Like, and I think we're seeing sort of a different part of that story again here, where it's really easy to hook up into an OpenAI API and
Yeah.
build a on top and say this is an AI tool.
Yeah,
And
and I want to pause on that too. This is like the Chat GPT wrapper, which is out there. A lot of people are talking about it. We do have a question from an anonymous attendee, which I think is kind of related to this. Why didn't you guys build the chatbot like everyone else? Smiley emoticon. So I think there is a world out there where like it's kind of like everybody's doing it. Everybody needs to have AI in their product. What exactly is like a Chat GPT wrapper or an LLM wrapper for someone who's not technical? Like what's happening out there? What do people need to be on the lookout for?
yeah, I think it's not bad. So the idea is that we have these really large models, and again, whereas they take a lot. LLMs are essentially large language models that are capable of generating novel, or to a degree novel stuff, right? It can. The idea there is that the LLMs are trained on large amount of the data, require large amounts of computational power to train, and there's
Yeah.
very few companies in the world that either have the resources to do
Hmm.
the computational.
And there's a little bit of sus about how folks are getting their data, which is another concern. Like how do
Right.
folks
That
know, like if it's such a, how did they scrape it? New York Times is now suing OpenAI about, scraping stuff behind their paywall. So there's some interesting
yes,
questions around. That's why like a lot of the news and a lot of the buzz, I think, is around some of the risk and some of the bias that's out there. But what's interesting is it sounds like if you're already a trusted partner and then you're integrating AI into your platform, you can go about decision making in a way that's maybe a little bit different from uh, you're in the rush. You need to kind of, I've heard it called AI washing, where like platforms are kind of cleaning themselves up by saying now there's AI inside, which
yeah.
is frequently like just connect to ChatGPT or Claude, right?
Which is again, like I think the idea is that so not a lot of companies can build LLMs, right? And it requires billions of dollars to do these things, lots of research, lots of computational resources, right? And lots of like human resources and expertise, and there's not that much of that expertise around in the world. Um, and so a lot of folks are building using OpenAI's models to do certain things, right? And they're very powerful models, like they're the best models in the world.
Yeah.
Claude is Topic, that's another company that's started by a few folks who left OpenAI. And the idea is, okay, you can do that, but basically are prompting the model to do certain things, right? But what we've seen in education, there's a bunch of research on it. Like I'll give you a very concrete example of this. So there's a lot of tutoring, AI tutors out there right now, right? There's a lot of buzz about AI tutoring. There's a lot of investments that are going into AI tutoring, but there's also a lot of research that shows that AI tutoring kind of doesn't work.
Yeah, and
Uh,
by AI tutoring, you mean like give kids access to chatbots, basically.
Chatbots, exactly. So the
Yeah.
idea is, I'm going after the chatbot question really. Like, yeah, and they just sort of prompt the chatbot for certain things and go back and forth, right?
Hmm.
That like there's hallucination problems, et cetera, et cetera. So you really this sort
It
of
also it also seems like it's kind of distracting from unless it's thoughtfully designed. It feels like as a kid, I wouldn't know. Do
what
I
to say.
do I talk to the teacher? Do I talk when do I use the chatbot? Like there is some integration questions, I guess. Like what interfaces are you given access to? Like are kids on screens all day?
And
Are
just wouldn't that be dystopian, right?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, but the idea is like that students can prompt a chatbot to learn things, right? Hey,
yeah.
teach me about osmosis, or teach me about Egypt in I don't know 6,000 BC or something like that. Like, and you have these models which have a lot of human knowledge already stored in them and can
Yep.
find that and give you like a summary of that, right?
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
the big idea. I think where it gets interesting is how do models, as you said, like uh, how do they access knowledge that they do not have, right?
Hmm.
Basically, they don't have curriculum knowledge. They don't know curriculum
Right,
structure. They don't
right,
know how it's
right.
generated. They
I've heard in AI circles there's the concept of a RAG too, which is like basically referencing a more authoritative source. So like
don't.
are there kind of like blended models that could emerge where you say for these types of things is more conditional logic. It's like this type of thing references an authoritative source and just spits that back out. There was actually the Adams administration had a problem in New York City around its chatbot that was released that was giving landlords and small business owners erroneous information. Mayor Adams said, "We're going to figure it out. You need to be, breaking things to learn." But
Right.
it's a place where I think there's a little more risk. And then the other point you were making earlier that I think is interesting is that at least for Kiddom, it's nice when those touch points are measured and understood, so that if you want to build off your own data, like your own sort of interactive data, learning data, performance data, like what types of behaviors are lead to success, and then also when does it look like we're losing kids? When do they seem less engaged? And then when are we actually reaching them? I imagine there are ways in which you can measure the impact of things like AI on performance. Like, how do you measure that? How do you know how do you know that Kiddom is working?
Oof, that's a hard question. How do we know that Kiddom wasn't? Well, if you're improving, I mean, the traditional logic of these things is if you're improving assessment test scores, summative assessment scores over time for a
Mhm.
school district, generally that means, and they're a heavy user of Kiddom,
I see.
then that's a good sign, right?
Mhm.
There's
Yep.
estimations you can do, and there's a bunch of learning and science stuff that's very prevalent on it. I think I look at it a bit differently. I think those are all lagging indicators. By the time the summative assessment gets done,
Yep.
that it's too late. And if you're waiting for that, so you need a bit more of an early indicator
Hmm.
of what that could be.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, that means teachers using the
Yep.
curriculum on a daily basis, weekly
Yep.
basis.
So it's like monthly active user, daily active users, and like your teachers are actually using and engaging with the platform, and that's a signal that there's health. There's at least, if that paired with achieving whatever their objectives are at the school or the state or the district level, those two boxes, it's a sign that things are moving in the right direction.
Right, and there's more concrete data you can get, right? Like because you have assessments in the curriculum, you have mid-unit assessments, you have end-of-unit assessments, and
Yep.
they become like this preamble or precursor to the actual summative assessment. So the real thing that we're very focused on is that we take the data and we look at it, we analyze it, and see how the standards achievement look across the district, and a, is that a predictable score for what what is going to be the eventual score, right?
Yep.
That's something that we're developing still. But the idea is that that's to me success. Like, we can tell you that based on the data we have,
I see.
how well are students going to do at the end of the year, right?
Hmm.
Are they not on track? I mean, even telling a school district that it's the middle of the year and most of your teachers on like unit 3, where they
Right.
should be 7,
Right.
and then so that you're not wondering by the end of the year, like, okay, how many, why didn't we get through the curriculum, why
Right.
didn't we do, like, all these things matter. I think
Right.
large degree core curriculum providers never had to be, do that because they were generally print providers, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Think, but we want to hold ourselves accountable to a higher degree, and that sometimes comes with, okay, that means that we have to do better, we have to provide more value, whether that's through AI tools, through improving the teacher experience, making it easier to use, making that easier to navigate,
Yeah.
making that easier to give. Like, we just have a higher bar to cross than like go open a book and just
Right.
read.
Yeah. And then high quality, maybe drilling in a little bit on what we mean by high quality instructional materials. Cause like I said, I like initialisms, I like acronyms. HQIM is now in my vernacular. So thank you for that. But if you're looking for high quality instructional materials nowadays, how do you know what they are? And this is a place where there's a lot of concern in the creative professions around, if you're a graphic designer, for example, a lot of the AI tools, the generative tools are getting better at that stuff, which I think, I guess maybe for instructional designers, there's potentially a little bit of risk there, but there's also a lot of upside if you're able to kind of snap into these tools to build instructional materials. What about the tip of the spear, like the highest quality instructional materials? are they going to be getting better? And is this stuff, there's this whole notion of supercharging. Is that a place where at least the tip of the spear, top percentile content, is it going to be even more kick-ass nowadays? Or are these like generative tools kind of, are they more about helping getting people up to kind of like mid-level?
I I think it depends on the creator. These are just tools. The
Hmm.
tools do not define the creation. Um, I think it depends on your philosophy. I think of, and we at Kiddom think that these tools enable humans to achieve more, right? Just fundamentally, there's more to be achieved by with tools than without tools. I mean, that's literally history of mankind from inception. Um, and I think that we should be able to build tools that make the best instructional designers just way more better and give them all these tools to do it. Like there's this idea of like, AI assistants that enable people to do, a lot more work. Um, I think the there's no question in my mind that that's going to happen eventually. I think we're not there yet. There's a lot more to figure out.
Hmm.
For anyone else, like these models still need more fine tuning. They really need a lot more instruction. We really need to figure out like and test
Yeah,
and things. There's a lot of like people making like sort of judgment calls on this already, but I
right.
think you need to pair back and like be like, okay, let's go do the thing and let's
Yeah,
figure
and it's
out.
like a dance, right? It's like AI is your dance partner here, where you're creating kind of the cutting edge stuff, and you got to bring something yourself. It's not like the AIs on their own are doing the next level work, but I do see it as an opportunity for folks who are playing with their head up to be kind of testing into this stuff. There's an interesting question here about how will Kiddom continue to respond to this AI movement as you start trying out some tools regarding teacher voice and choice moving forward. Yeah, how do you engage with teachers? How do you get to know your end users, and how do you kind of empower them and be listening to them when you're thinking about your roadmap?
Yeah, I mean, we really can't build a roadmap without listening to our users. That's just not a good, like, we should never do that. Um, Very concretely, even with these AI tools, they're in testing right now with customers right now. We're not doing a full release, until
I see.
mid to later this year. And the idea is like we want to get more feedback, we want to get more data, we want to get, if we get more great data, we'll train the AI more on the data models we have. Um, Based, the idea is that it's constantly iterating based on customer feedback, whether that's AI or not. We have
Mhm.
formed have a UX research initiative at Kiddom that works with teachers and make sure their voice is heard. For these AI tools, we're working very closely with a cohort and segment of teachers that are heavy users of Kiddom, and we're getting like this constant feedback from them, and we're
Yeah.
looking at thoughts and we're looking at how they're using it.
Mhm.
I think that's our, we are going to be putting these things in beta, testing them, and then gradually releasing more and more as get more and more conviction. And sometimes we might just not release things because
Right.
we might just, we tested it, it didn't work out, and
Mhm.
pull back.
Right. And then you mentioned teachers, another constituency out there. There's a question here about curriculum authors. As a former Kaplan curriculum developer from back in the day, this one speaks to my heart. Are you thinking about those users, and how might authors, folks who, I mean, teachers frequently are curriculum authors as well, but how might authors stand to benefit from Kiddom's use of large language models?
And there's um we are excited about working with our author partners and showing them some of the capabilities that we have. I think by building these products, we have gathered capabilities at Kiddom to understand how correct, and this is going to be an evolution over time for us as well, where we understand how to put these models to use to give authors better tools. So one of the things that we're super interested in is that can we give authors better tools to build curriculum over time?
Mhm.
Like, or in again, it's the same ethos that we have on the teacher side and the
Yeah.
administrators. Can we give administrators better tools to understand the data that the teachers and students are producing based on the use of Kiddom by giving
Mhm.
them language interfaces? to understand the data. That's a problem we can solve there. Like on
Right.
the author side, we're really interested in the problem where how, as an author, can I get access to tools so that I can multiply my impact across the
Yeah.
world.
Right.
Like right now, there's a real resource constraint. Like every time you want to write something new, you need to go hire a whole bunch of authors to do it. You have to
Yep.
get time and correlation lines. Like we know all these problems. I think a lot of these problems can be AI mediated and then human QA'd over time. And the
Yeah.
idea that's the, can we build tools to enable us to do that?
Hmm. Yeah. There's a question here too. Where do you see stuff down the road, 10 years? Regarding curriculum and instruction, like it is this is where we enter either it frequently winds up being a Black Mirror episode. So that's where you want to be careful. You don't want to go, you don't want to break too bad. But if you're looking ahead, trying to understand where the future may take us, it does feel like one of the one of the big revelations, I think, coming out of this AI wave is that things that we thought were gonna be exclusively the domain of humans is now a shared dance floor, to get back to my dance metaphor here. Like we're not alone anymore. Like there's other folks who can do things that we thought were exclusively human. Thoughts on where this might play forward? And I have heard, I talk to like futurists at times. They say it's good to come up with multiple scenarios. So like it's not always good. Sci-fi is great. You have to call your shot and maybe go dark. But I imagine maybe there are some ways it could go negative, maybe some upside, some risks. If you're working in a school, you playing with your head up, some thoughts about where the future may take us?
Oof, I'm not a futurist, so I do not feel very good at predicting the 10 years. What I think is interesting is that one way to look at it, from my perspective, is that this is another wave of automation. And one way to look at it is that we have robots doing groceries, we have computer programs doing sorting. Everyone, if you look in the 1950s and 60s, every cell in an Excel spreadsheet used to be a human doing computation on a computer, right? So someone would do a sum, would someone do subtractions, like, and there would be hundreds of people doing like one computation one by one.
Yep. Yep.
Basically became a spreadsheet. So if
Hmm.
you look at that analogy, right, like that, this is just that, like
Yeah.
a bunch of like really rote manual tasks
Yeah.
that can now be fit into technology and that can do it is just a wave of automation. And we're working towards that.
Yeah.
The concern comes in that eventually that will lead to AGI, like sort of this artificial general intelligence. People used to
Hmm.
call it, there's a, and that's the mantra of like, that's the big battle now, right? Like,
Yeah,
okay,
that's the open AI Sam Altman thing. It's also, immediately my thoughts go to Skynet,
yeah,
just because that's
exactly.
how I roll. Yeah.
And people are like, okay, we will have artificial general intelligence. I think one way to think about it, if okay, is that okay, that's one scenario, is that we have this sort of God AI and this over all seeing, or there's another scenario where we have all these AI enables amazing tools that enable them, robots to pasture land and grow food and create rain, and we have and take repair the ozone and sort of all these things that we need to get done, build ships so we can go to other planets. Like all these things now become a little bit easier because we
Yeah.
have a dance that we can do, as you said,
Yeah.
with robots, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
achieve these things.
Yeah.
Uh,
It does remind me a little bit of David Brown has another interesting question here. Does AI implement teaching learning strategies into lesson planning? Would the teacher have a hand in personalizing it towards their classroom? It is an interesting, like it's like the role of the teacher in some ways becomes the center of the universe in some ways, right? Where they have to interface both with the AI, but then there's a lot of talk about human skills and the idea that we're going to need to get better at collaborating and being creative and being sort of emotionally present for others. So like the teacher's going to have to still do that while hitting on all these other things. Do you think the teacher is going to have some ability to kind of like train the model or sort of tailor the personalization in the future?
oh yeah, absolutely. I think the idea is that the best scenario or one vision of the future, it would be that every student gets a version of great high quality instructional material curriculum that's tailored towards their need, and every teacher gets to take every student towards their own pathway. We're not there yet. That's a hard problem to solve, but I think it's solvable over time. But the idea is that the teacher should be the facilitator, and the teacher should be the facilitator for 30 different personalized pathways built on high quality instructional materials.
Hmm.
And yes, I think teachers should be always be able to personalize in for the classroom because they already do it. It's just that we
Yeah.
don't capture it through tools. We don't capture it really well through technology right now. If you look at like most of the programming, the teacher goes to a student and tells them, instructs them to do certain thing. That's personalization.
Yeah. Right. Well, also, I mean, the other term I've heard out there is the personal virtual assistant. So the idea that like we're basically customizing our own series, our own
Yeah.
you know, bots, you know, and you'll be able to train it. And it is interesting to think about that context. The co-pilot context too is the other one that's out there where teacher co-pilots, you know, like if you have something on your phone enabled or whatever other interfaces emerge, like you got to imagine that's going to be a pretty meaningful tool set that, you know, even you think about vision as another interface that, you know, once the glasses get better, there'll be different ways to kind of give teachers, supercharge them by partnering the right way with AI. We've got our last question here. Looks like Whitney has our last question. How can we ensure that AI enhances learning outcomes while also fostering critical thinking, creativity, and empathy in students?
By enabling teachers.
There you go. There you
There you go.
go. This was a wonderful session. I think we'll close it there. Thanks everyone for joining. Any final thoughts here, Essen, as we're wrapping up? Any takeaways for folks? There's a website which we shared, go.kiddom.co/kiddom-AI. Yeah, that'll be out there if folks want to check out what's new and is happening. That was an AI generated question. Excellent. Yeah, are any of you in the chat bots? You have to reveal yourself. If I ask you, please fess up if anyone in there was actually not a human.
Just my avatar. I'm just
Yeah, by the way, Kiddum's AI tools are so good. Both Essen and I are actually relaxing at a nearby watering hole while the AI has powered this entire webinar. You're welcome. That was a joke. That was a joke. This
we
is
wish.
fun. This is fun.
Thank you. This
Thanks,
is
folks. Thanks, everybody who was asking questions. Makes it more interesting.
appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.